Donald Trump is not simply facing political opposition, he is being crushed under the weight of his own design.
What happens when the most powerful man in America suddenly runs away from reporters? This is Donald Trump in July 2025, the same man who once boasted about saying it like it is, now fleeing from questions about his past. What we're about to show you is the real-time collapse of political power, not through bullets or ballots, but through the slow, inexorable weight of truth. January 20th, 2025. Donald Trump takes the oath of office for the second time, riding high on electoral victory. His approval ratings, a solid 47%. But by July, something had changed. Dramatically. Atlas Intel, one of the most respected polling firms in America, released numbers that sent shockwaves through Washington. Trump's approval rating had plummeted to just 44%. His disapproval, a staggering 55%. News anchor, this represents the lowest approval rating of Trump's second term. But here's what makes this story truly extraordinary. This wasn't just any polling firm. This was the same organization that had accurately predicted the 2024 election results when others had failed. The man who had once seemed politically invincible was hemorrhaging support at a rate that stunned even his harshest critics. But the polls were just the beginning. The real story lay in what was causing this unprecedented collapse. To understand Trump's downfall, we need to go back to April 2025. That's when he signed what he called One Big Beautiful Bill, legislation that proposed massive cuts to Medicaid and food assistance programs. The bill was supposed to be his signature domestic achievement. Instead, it became the first crack in his armor. 53% of Americans had a negative view of that bill. It was the moment when Trump's base started to realize that his policies might actually hurt them personally. But if the bill was a crack, what happened next was a sledgehammer. Los Angeles, June 2025. Immigration protests erupted across the city as Trump's ICE enforcement reached new levels of aggression. Families were separated, children cried on television. America watched in horror. Trump's response? Deploy 4,000 National Guard troops and 700 Marines to suppress American citizens exercising their constitutional right to protest. The images were devastating. This wasn't law and order. This was a president at war with his own people, and the American public was watching every second of it. But if Trump thought the LA protests were his biggest problem, he was about to discover something far worse lurking in his past. July 2025. The name Jeffrey Epstein began appearing in headlines again, not as ancient history, but as a present-day political crisis. What the American people were about to learn would shake their faith in the presidency itself. Reporters said, "Mr. President, can you comment on your relationship with Jeffrey Epstein?" Watch Trump's face in this moment. This is the exact second when everything changed. For the first time in his political career, Donald Trump had no answer. The man who had built his brand on never backing down, backed down. But why? What was he so afraid of? Documents had surfaced. Video footage from a 1991 beauty pageant Trump had hosted, featuring girls as young as 14. Multiple sources confirming that Trump and Epstein weren't just acquaintances, they were close friends. Former Epstein associate said, "They were like wingmen. Trump knew exactly what Jeffrey was about, and he didn't care." The polling numbers told the story. When asked specifically about Trump's handling of the Epstein revelations, only 17% of Americans approved. 17%. This wasn't just political damage. This was political annihilation. While Trump's past was catching up with him, his present was falling apart just as spectacularly. The tariff war Trump had promised would be easy to win was destroying American families from the inside out. Ground beef, $6 per pound, orange juice, up 54%. Basic groceries becoming luxury items for working families. Mother of three said, "We used to be able to afford a normal shopping trip. Now I'm calculating every item. It's not sustainable." Richard Wolff said, "What Trump's tariff policy demonstrates is the fundamental disconnect between Wall Street economics and Main Street reality. These policies benefit financial speculators and large corporations who can weather the storm while devastating working families. It's a perfect example of how American capitalism socializes the costs while privatizing the profits." Trump's economic advisor had warned him privately that tariffs were taxes on American consumers, not foreign countries. He ignored them. Former economic advisor said, "He genuinely believed that China would just absorb the cost. When I tried to explain basic economics to him, he would cut me off and say, 'You don't understand deals.'" Richard Wolff said, "What we're witnessing is the predictable collapse of an economic policy built on fundamental misunderstandings of how capitalism actually works. Tariffs don't punish foreign countries. They punish American workers and consumers. This is basic economics that any first-year student would understand, but Trump's administration chose ideology over reality. The result? An economic policy so devastating that even traditional Republican voters began abandoning him. But perhaps the most telling moment came when Trump, desperate for vindication, filed a $10 billion lawsuit against Rupert Murdoch and the Wall Street Journal, his own traditional allies. $10 billion for damage to his reputation. The same reputation already destroyed by felony convictions, sexual abuse findings, and now the Epstein connections. Legal experts said, "It was the move of a desperate man. You don't sue your friends unless you're completely out of options." By June 2025, the wheels were coming off completely. Iran. Trump had ordered airstrikes on 3 nuclear facilities, thinking it would boost his strongman image. Instead, Iran retaliated by launching missiles at a U.S. base in Qatar. American service members were injured. The Middle East teetered on the brink of war. And Americans asked themselves, is this the leadership we voted for? The answer, according to every major poll, was a resounding no. CNN found that his 41% approval rating was the lowest for any newly elected president at the 100-day mark in modern history. Lower than Carter, lower than Nixon during Watergate. Even among his own voters, cracks were showing. While 96% of his strongest supporters still backed him, among those who had voted for him reluctantly, support had collapsed from 88% to just 75%. Former Trump voter, "I didn't sign up for this chaos. I thought he'd learned something from his first term." July 18, 2025. A press conference that was supposed to be routine damage control became the moment that defined Trump's presidency. Watch his face when the Epstein question comes. This is a man who built his career on never showing weakness, never admitting fault, never backing down. Reporter asked, "Mr. President, Ghislaine Maxwell has stated that you were aware of Jeffrey Epstein's activities with underage girls. How do you respond?" For 17 seconds, we counted, Donald Trump said nothing. The most powerful man in the world, speechless. Then he did something that stunned everyone in that room. He walked away. No deflection, no attack on the media, no claim of fake news, just silence. Press corps. Member said, "In 20 years covering politics, I've never seen anything like it. He just gave up." The reaction was swift and brutal. Trump runs trending worldwide within hours. Memes of the president fleeing from reporters, late-night comedians having a field day. Comedian said, "Folks, we found the one question that finally stumped Donald Trump. Can you explain your friendship with a convicted sex trafficker?" But beyond the jokes was something deeper, something more troubling. Voter 1. I defended him through everything. The lawsuits, the investigations, all of it. But this, I can't defend this. Voter 2. My daughter asked me why the president won't answer questions about protecting children. I didn't know what to say. The evangelical base that had been his firewall was cracking. Family values voters struggling to reconcile their support for a man now linked to child exploitation. Evangelical leader said, "We must ask ourselves, are we supporting biblical values or are we supporting a man?" By July 20th, Trump's approval rating had hit 39% in some polls. His disapproval? A crushing 56%. But perhaps the most devastating number was this one. Among independent voters, his approval had collapsed to just 31%. In American politics, you cannot survive without independence. As we finish this documentary, Donald Trump remains president. But the man who once dominated every news cycle, who commanded attention with a single tweet, who seemed to bend reality to his will, that man is gone. What we've witnessed is something unprecedented in American history. The real-time collapse of political power through the sheer weight of accumulated truth. Historians said, Dean, Trump's genius was making people believe that truth was negotiable, that reality was whatever he said it was. But there are some truths that are so heavy, so undeniable, that even the most sophisticated propaganda machine can't lift them. Richard Wolff said, "This collapse reveals something deeper about American capitalism itself. When you build an economy on speculation, financial manipulation, and wealth concentration rather than productive investment, you get leaders like Trump, people who understand leverage and spectacle, but have no comprehension of how real economic value is created. His fall is really the fall of a parasitic economic model that was always unsustainable. The Epstein connections, the economic devastation, the authoritarian crackdowns, the desperate lawsuits against former allies. Each revelation another weight added to a scale that was always destined to tip. The American people, it turns out, have limits. There are lines that cannot be crossed, even by the most charismatic demagogue. Trump believed his own mythology. He thought he was untouchable, invincible, above the very concept of accountability. He was wrong. The question now isn't whether Trump can recover from this collapse. The question is whether American democracy can recover from Trump. Because in the end, this story isn't really about one man's fall from grace. It's about what happens when a democracy finally says, enough. The unraveling is complete. What comes next is up to us.